Hi, I wanted to have a bit of a chat to you all today about the hashtag #MeToo and how it applies to teaching healthcare workers. So you might wonder why a white, middle-aged, cis male who loves his two-wheel toys wants to talk about Me Too. For those of you who don't know, cis means the gender you identify as is the same or aligns to the gender you're assigned at birth. So I want to start with just a short story. It's not shocking or terrible or awful. It's just a simple story about an everyday occurrence. So I was the male nurse in charge of an intensive care unit. It's a very wide-ranging job. You need to know what's going on with every single one of the patients in the unit in detail. You need to know what's going on with every single one of the nurses who's looking after these patients in the unit. Right, so there was this one doctor, and he had a reputation for being very dismissive of nurses and not taking on board what they had to say. He was, the kind, he was an older man, and the letters after his name meant more than the letters after your name. But I'd never really had a problem with him. He always listened and respected to what I'd say. Right, so we were rounding with this one doctor, the doctor who has this bit of a reputation for not listening to nurses. And rounding is where a gaggle of doctors, allied health and students will all go around and visit every patient. The senior registrar will go in and assess the patient, feed that back to the consultant, and then the consultant will discuss amongst the students and all the other staff. And then right at the very end, they'll ask the nurse if they've got any input, anything they want to say. So I was doing a pre-round. So what I do as the nurse in charge, I would go and visit every nurse before the round and see if they had anything that they needed to add or anything to discuss. So I was going around doing this pre-round. I said to the nurse, is there anything you want to raise with the consultant? And so she said, I've got this problem, but I want you to raise it. And I looked at her and gone, okay, she's very junior. Maybe she just needs a bit more confidence to be able to speak to the consultant, because there is a very big power differential. So I thought, yeah, maybe I'll just boost her up. And I thought, let's just see where this is coming from. And she said to me, you need to raise it with him. And I've explored it and said, okay, well, why do I have to raise it? You know you have the power, you have the responsibility to raise these issues. And she said, yeah, but you've got testicles. He'll listen to you. And that's what floored me. That changed my worldview, that one moment. And you go, oh, my goodness. It's true, he will listen to me. I'm a man. I'm a nurse, but I'm a man. So he listens to me. And where else was this happening? Was this happening in every facet? Was it just this one doctor? So that sent me on a crusade. I was going. So I went and had a chat to people of all genders that I knew and said, well, what's your experience? I want to know how does this affect you? Have you ever had anything like this? And I was mind blown. The women I spoke to, it was every single day. The men I spoke to, they had to think and wonder, oh yeah, I do have one example. Now that tells me there's a bit of a problem. More than a bit of a problem, this is a big problem. For the women, it was an everyday occurrence. For the men, it was difficult to come up with an example. So this just shows the massive entrenched biases that we've got, not just in our insular healthcare system, but across society. But this one nurse, she was trying to look after her patient the best way she knew, and that was to get the right care for her patient. And the best way she knew was to enlist an ally to help her to get this best care. So from my position of privilege, really, as a white, middle-aged, cis male. I wanted to then go and explore and say, well, is this me? Do I do these things that make 99% of women uncomfortable? Is there something in my tone of voice? Do I listen appropriately? I mean, I've always tried my best to be a fair and equal person and treat anyone, regardless of gender, race, ability, shoe size, as the same. But was there an unconscious bias? This is something I needed to explore. So was I achieving my goal of treating everyone fairly? I don't know. I really don't. I can't see myself through other people's eyes. All I can do is try. So how do we fix this? It's a big problem. So I was a medic in the army, so I take a military view of things sometimes, but we need to try and take some of these ideas that the military has and apply them not to war, but to making women feel safe and heard and listened to and respected. So we need to enlist more men as trusted allies. Allies that will listen to women and support them. It's not that hard, really. This does sound very warlike, and it is a war, it's a culture war. So we're not just preventing harm to women, we're preventing harm to patients. This is one thing we need to think about. So, as educators, we are uniquely positioned to be able to enact this change, to be able to change the next generation, to teach them. Now, there's a concept circulating that actually actively encourages men. It's one that's supported by government. There were government campaigns saying, call it out. So call out bad behaviour. This is great. This is a great first step. But that's all it is. It's just a first step. So we've got this great teaching opportunity where we can say, that is not acceptable behaviour. So this is the challenging bit. You are being asked to challenge, directly challenge, a very dominant personality. That's hard. One thing that worries a lot of people is, how is that dominant personality going to respond to being challenged? Does calling it out actually result in changed behaviour? I mean, what are the chances that a man's going to respond appropriately and realise and address underlying behaviours? I mean, I can just imagine how this was going to play out. You've got your dominant man. Yeah, I grabbed her by the pussy. Yeah, Don, that's not okay. You're all a bunch of pussies. And then he'll just go off, find someone else to assault, find another group of men to brag about it to. It's a good first step, but it's not quite enough. So I'm going to ask you to do something else. Call it in. Bring him in. Have a conversation. Turn it stepwise. Don, how did it make you feel? So he may or may not love this one. He has the opportunity to revel in the power and the self-glorification, but he may get that little inkling that something's not quite right. How do you think that made us feel? Do you think we approve of that? This one's not going to be quite so popular. It introduces a feeling of discomfort, of disquiet, but this is where we can start to shift that conversation and shift the dialogue about what is acceptable and what's not. The most important question: how do you think that made her feel? This one may well just be rejected straight out of hand. But the more times he hears this, the more people he hears it from, the more you might get to start changing that behaviour and the concept about what's acceptable and not acceptable. Sowing seeds of doubt. It may take some time for all of these seeds to bloom, but it is worth it. every single time. So for those of us who are male in this society, in this culture, we have a responsibility to have this conversation, not to berate. Having a conversation will ultimately have a better result. And if he doesn't listen, if he doesn't respond, it's a start. Maybe when he hears it from the next person, or the next person after that, or the next, or the next, or the next, that's when we start to shift the dialogue. That's where we need to make these changes. As most women know, men's voices will be heard. Maybe not straight away, won't be accepted straight away, but hearing it from a man will make a difference. So what are your next steps if you feel you haven't been heard? Pick up the conversation another time. Keep the conversation going with other men. This is where we see change. So let's start young. Teach our junior staff to call it in. Make having these conversations normal. Make these discussions a part of everyday life. And maybe, just maybe, particularly all us men, together, we can make Me Too a thing of the past. Thank you.